Alright, so this is going to be my Game of Thrones Season 6, Episode 9 review. It's basically just going to be a rant. So Season 6, Episode 9, I mean, I'm surprised we didn't just have Yara and Daenerys, 69 and for most of this video. It'd be pretty fucking exciting. But, I guess it's actually Episode 59, so that wouldn't make any sense. Okay. So, here's how I feel about this. The show is great, and it's probably one of my favorite shows of all times, but there is just some obvious flaws in it that I have to get out there. The directing, the choreographing, I mean, the battle was dope, I have to admit. I mean, both battles were dope. The CGI dragons were dope. The Battle of the Bastards was dope. It was all around, it was probably one of the best episodes. But that being said, what can I say? I'm full to the tits with ideas. I've got ideas, you've got ideas, we all got ideas, man, don't we? I mean, that's clever how they put that in a couple episodes ago, but it still doesn't really make any sense. I guess they're kind of doing that just to spite the people who are like, I mean, there's a lot of people who review this show, and, Dan and Dave probably, watch Preston Jacobs' videos and cry themselves to sleep. I don't know. I mean, I actually think they probably do watch these videos. Like, George R. R. Martin has even made comments, like, he watches the reviews, like, they're all aware of these stuff going on. And it's kind of weird, like, most people after this episode were not criticizing it at all. I mean, Preston criticized it, but a lot of the other review people weren't criticizing it, which I thought was a bit odd. But, I mean, overall, I think they've done a good job in this show. Like, I still think it's one of the greatest shows of all times. It's definitely on the level with Lord of the Rings and other fantasy, well, it's mostly movies, but, I mean, this is a TV show. It's like Lord of the Rings was, probably like 30 hours all combined. Probably not even. This is 60 hours. I mean, that in itself is awesome. And there's been a lot of awesome battles and stuff. But the story itself, these books that George R. R. Martin has written are brilliantly written. And I think that the show is kind of not living up to these books to a certain extent. But like I said, I'm full to the tits with idea. Okay, so the show has always had a thing with shock effect. Okay, yeah, the first episode 9, we had Eddard Stark get his head chopped off. That's always been a theme. Like, they always have the shock effect deaths. And, the first episode, Ned was like, the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. And then, we see in episode 9, Joffrey's just like, Sir Ellen, bring me his head. And, he chops the dude's head off. Which, I mean, when I first saw that was when I was just like, wow, this show is dope. Like, I hadn't read any of the books. I didn't know anything about it. But I pretty much I was in a mythology class at my school, and, we saw that scene with Daenerys stepping into the pyre, and I was like, oh shit, it seemed pretty cool. I'll give it a try. So I started to just binge watch it, illegally. Sorry, I'm a pirate, Ironborn. So yeah, that's when I really fell in love with the show, because it is a great show, and the story, these books, are just amazing. But, so George R. R. Martin is the one who, I mean, he's beautifully written these books, but he also does the shock effect thing. But the way that they do the shock effect in the show is much different than the way they do the shock effect in the books. Like, my friend just finished, the third book, and he was just like, dude, what the fuck, man? Everybody died, like, oh my god, I can't even believe that. Like, and I was like, yeah, man, that's pretty much how it works. And it's always been a theme, like Vala Mongolis, all men must die. And And we see these people die, the Red Wedding, Ned Stark getting beheaded, Battle of Blackwater, Shireen's death last season. It's all a lot of time. Oh, and Jon Snow's death at the end of last season too. They're all men must die, but they're also unglorified deaths. So it doesn't glorify death in any way. I mean, Robb died just getting stabbed up. He didn't die in an epic battle or anything. He died, at a wedding. Didn't see it coming. Got stabbed up. I mean, his wife died. His baby died. His mom died. They all got slaughtered there at the Red Wedding. But like I said, the way George R. R. Martin writes it is much different than the way that they portray it in the show. And yes, I'm pissed off that Rickon died. And he died in such a irritating way. Because, okay, let's think about this. So Jon and Sansa were in the tent talking, and they were like, okay, so what should we do? And she was just like, well, he's already dead. I mean, Ramsay's just going to kill him, so whatever, I want to be queen anyway. Which, I mean, I was just like, oh, damn, okay, whatever, Sansa. But, I mean, in the past, we've seen, in the history of Westeros, we've seen, in this book, and just from reading the other books, when Aerys Targaryen got kidnapped, the best swordsman in the world, him and his other knights, snuck into the castle at night and freed their king. Oh, so the best swordsman in the world and freeing the king from a castle. Okay, so why didn't Jon try to do that? Okay. Anyway, so then they're out here in the field. And Ramsay's like, oh, we want to play games, little man? And, Rickon, no lines, no nothing. And he just starts running forward. See, the consistency, that's what pisses me off. There's no consistency. You can't have Arya get stabbed up, fall into the water. I mean, that fall in itself, she would have never came out of that water. She would have sunk down to the bottom, and you would have never seen her again. I mean, at least in Rickon's case, he could have ran zigzag, could have got nicked in the arm. I mean, Ramsay's not God. He can't just fucking snipe somebody in the heart from however far away. Like, it's ridiculous. But, I mean, okay, there's some consistency there because, we've always seen Ramsay's a good hunter and all that. Okay. But the consistency in Rickon's character, and we didn't get to see shit from Rickon this season, which I'm pissed off about. Rickon, from what we knew of him, from the very first few episodes, he was like sad that everybody was leaving him, and he was like, and his brother Bran was like, don't worry, they'll be back, and he was just like straight thug, like, no they won't. And he was right. I mean, damn, the kid was like 5 years old then, and he already knew what was going on. I mean, he was a tough kid. Like, he knew what was going on. He was 5 years old. He was very mature for his age, and he was like, no, they won't be back. And at the same time, we see Sansa, making out with Joffrey, like, oh, I want to be a princess, and all that stuff, So, it's just annoying because it's like, here's Rickon, much younger, but much wiser than she is, and, we didn't get to see anything from him, and then we see Sansa, just kind of gradually become a player in the Game of Thrones and learning things. But it pisses me off because, okay, and I've said this before, but it's like, we saw that scene in season 1 with whatever, the Pope or whoever the fuck that is, teaching Bran. And I hate when they reuse actors like that. That's fucking garbage. That Ironborn dude already stabbed you with a spear, dude. You can't just be back now. Anyway, he was teaching Bran, like, here's all the houses. And Bran was like, family, duty, honor, yeah? Well, why'd everybody fucking leave me? And, so he was going through the houses of all the different places, not just the north, all of the different places, all of the lands. So I assume the Maester taught Sansa that as well. Maester Luwin taught Sansa that stuff as well. So she knows who owns the Dreadfort. She knows who has a flayed man on their banner, okay? There is no way in God fuck that she would have went to Winterfell after knowing... She would not want to marry Ramsay after knowing that they have a fucking flayed man on their banner. It makes no sense. Anyway, so George R. R. Martin has done interviews before where he's... because he's always been praised for his strong female characters. And... so he's always been praised for that, and they said, like, oh, how do you write such good characters? And he said, well, you know, with me, it's not about, like, who I'm writing about. I just kind of think, like, whoever they are, they think the same way I do. So I try to get in their head and see it from their perspective, whether they're a dwarf or a princess or, you know, Daenerys or Theon Greyjoy getting castrated. Whoever they are, you know, we're all not that different. We all kind of think the same. So he gets into these people's heads, and that's why he's so good at writing these characters. With Dan and Dave, I'm not seeing that, because they just... You can't have Sansa be dumb enough to marry Ramsay, you know, 6 months ago, and then now she's already knows about, you know, fucking battle strategy and stuff. Like, she was smart enough to know about luring Ramsay out of the castle. I mean, it's pretty wise stuff for somebody who apparently forgot about the flayed man on the banner. Like, I can't ever see that making any sense. So, whatever. And, okay, here's what I think happened. And, of course, I don't know. I'm just a dumbass. So they were like, okay, so what should we do with Sansa's character this season? And George R. R. Martin was like, well, you know, maybe send her to Winterfell. So they were like, okay, we'll send her to Winterfell. But they didn't, like, think it out in a logical way of why she would go to Winterfell. They were just like, oh, she's going to go to Winterfell now. And that is kind of what I think happened. Communication breakdown, really, between the author and the writers of the show, or whatever. And, no, I say all the time, Troy is one of my favorite movies, and it was made by these same guys. Like, Troy is a spectacular movie, but at the same time, I kind of feel like you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and they kind of have what they're good at, which is, you know, making these epic battle scenes. But I want the writing, but I want it to be a satisfying battle scene because I want it to mean something. You know? And what do I mean by that? Like, okay. So, yes, the battle was dope. I mean, this was probably one of the best episodes of the show ever. I still think the Battle of Blackwater was better, but this was probably one of the best episodes of the show. And then, you know, I get on Twitter and I see all these people saying, like, oh, yeah, look, I'm so happy they have, like, the Stark banner on Winterfell now. And I was like, oh, yeah, because it's still ruled by Snows and Boltons, so I don't know what you're so happy about. The King of the North just died, you know. But it's not all... I can't be too critical, because there is some intelligence there. I mean, okay, so Rickon, the actor who plays Rickon, I assume he's probably, like, 14 or 15 by now. So he's like the young wolf. So he's basically the age that Robb Stark died when he was the young wolf. Obviously not in the show. He was about, 27. But in the books, yeah, he was like 15. So he was the young wolf. And that's who Rickon was. And even if you're going to give Rickon this unglorified death, here's what you should have done. Because we already saw in the past that Rickon's like a stubborn dude. Like, remember when Osha was like, we'll take you to the Umbers. They'll teach you how to fight. And he was like, I know how to fight. Okay. So when he's standing there with Ramsay and he's like, you want to play games, little man? He told him to go run out in the field. He should have been like, nah, dude. He should have spit in his face or something. If you're going to give him no lines, at least let him spit in Ramsay's face or something. He should have spit in Ramsay's face and be like, nah, dude, I ain't scared of you. I'm just going to stand right here. And just stood there. And then Ramsay could have, like, stabbed him up or whatever. I would have been happier with that. Because there's no glory in that death, but there is glory in these deaths. Like, you don't have to have an epic sword fight for there to be just this smallest seeds of glory in its death, because it's like, if he just does this slightest bit of spiting the person who kills him, then it is a glorified death. It doesn't have to be an epic sword fight, whereas, I mean, of course, I did want to see an epic sword fight between, some of the main characters. But I can see that's always been a theme of the show. I'm not criticizing that. That's always been a theme of the show. But yeah, I mean, Rickon they should have gave him more than they gave him. I mean, that was bullshit. He was the king of the North. Also, this doesn't make any fucking sense. The Umbers, apparently the most loyal house, and even if they're not the most loyal house, why would they side with Ramsay? Once Sansa left Winterfell, and that was common knowledge, he had no claim. Okay, he killed Roose Bolton. Roose Bolton was he was a piece of shit too. He flayed men. But he was a good battle commander. I wouldn't say he was Robb Stark's right-hand man, but he was one of his leading advisors, because he knew a lot about war. He was a wise and smart battle commander. That's why he was able to become the Warden of the North, despite being a piece of shit and, using the Red Wedding to gain that power. But he was a legitimate Bolton. He was a very wise man, and he would have never got out of that. If Roose would have been there, there's no way he would have met them in the field, because he's smarter than that. There's no way. And around the North, there is some communication around there. People know who Ramsay is. They know he's the piece of shit who flays people. He's a psychopath. No one wants to kneel before a psychopath, okay? And things are so broken down in the North now that it's just like, it doesn't make any sense for this Bolton who, since he married Sansa, he doesn't have the Lannister support anymore. And he's just some bastard who's just, sitting in Winterfell. If you believe the history, whereas Sam even says the history could all be lies. It could all be made up. So maybe there was, in the past, all the Stark men died, and there was a Stark girl who had a son who they just decided, okay, you're just still going to be the Stark heir. We're still going to name you Stark, even though that doesn't make any fucking sense, because whoever she married would have been like, no, I want him to be named Tully or Tarly or whoever it was. The man still would have wanted his son to be named his name, okay? So, 1,000 years, and you've never broken this chain. And then now this kid gets sniped, and then he's dead. Whatever. It's ridiculous, stupid, just stupidity. At least let him go out fighting. And the other thing is, I know this was episodes ago, but they should have used the money for 1-1. What attachment do we have to 1-1? None. No, no pun intended. No, but we could have just had Shaggy Dog and Ghost in that battle instead of 1-1. And it would have been way cooler. And you know why? Because we had the wolves in the very first episode. So it would have, wrapped around and been a whole program. Not just, we threw this CGI giant in there last season because we want to win awards for CGI because, we can do all this stuff now. It's 2015. We can make this awesome CGI battle. And it's going to be so epic and cool, which it was. But we had no attachment to 1-1. We have attachment to Ghost and Shaggy Dog. So at least if you're going to have Shaggy Dog die, at least have, Rickon warg into him, rip some throats out, kill a few of the Karstark men, or do something. At least then it would all mesh as a whole cinematic masterpiece, not just like we're just gonna kind of like chop things up, and each season is kind of its own thing. It's not all one movie. It's just kind of just separate mind fuck over here, over there, and I don't like that. I don't like to see that. So okay, so they kill people for the sheer shock effect of it. That is so clear and obvious. The Shireen thing, clear shock effect. And that's where I think the miscommunication between George and the show writers happened again, because he probably said something like, "Oh yeah, well yeah, Shireen's gonna be burned by Stannis, like, or burned by Melisandre." Well, Winds of Winter isn't out yet, so we don't know. But he told them, but he assumed that they would make it make sense, but they didn't. He just assumed like, oh yeah, they have their shit together. They'll make it make sense, which they didn't do. He told them the plot. He told them, the endings or the next chapter of his masterpiece, and just, they fucked it up. They took their eye off the ball. And here's the other thing. George R. R. Martin does the shock effect thing too, and that Too Many Cooks video. I saw that about last year when it came out. Everybody was watching that. And I immediately said, the first time I saw it, I was like, you guys know what that's about? They were like, oh, it's just some stupid thing Adult Swim made. And I was like, no, it's about George R. R. Martin killing off all of his characters. The dude clearly looks like George R. R. Martin, and it's about George R. R. Martin killing off all of his characters. So he does the same thing. Every time somebody asks him to, when his next book's going to be out, he kills another Stark. Okay, whatever, man. Here's the thing. I played football in high school, and one day, it was a hot summer day like today, and I was out there practicing, went out for a pass, caught it, ran into the end zone. My coach was like, no, don't do it like that. Don't catch it one-handed and run out with the ball away from your body. You got to hold it high and tight. Focus on the little details, because the little details are what's going to, help you in the long run. He said, you're not Calvin Johnson. You gotta work on the details, because you're not Calvin Johnson. You're not a pro. We know the pros do whatever the fuck they want, but it even messes him up, because we saw that game against Seattle where that dude from Seattle punched the ball out on the 1-yard line, which the Lions still should have won that game, but that's that's something else. I can talk about that in a different video. Anyway, what the point I'm trying to make is, in the way that I'm not Calvin Johnson, these guys are not George R. R. Martin. So you can't do things in the same way he does. And I think it's clear and obvious that they don't. I mean, they do things for the sheer... And nobody was shocked by that either. I mean, when Shireen died, wasn't really shocked. When Rickon died, we knew this is exactly what was going to happen. I mean, yes... The battle was dope. On the level with Saving Private Ryan, Troy, these other epic movies and stuff. Yeah, it was awesome. And it looked like it was all one shot. But I wasn't surprised by anything. There was no surprises. I mean, the closest thing to surprise was like the suspense of I thought Jon was going to die. But... he almost drowned in bodies. I mean, it was dark. This is a dark show. It always has been. But this is the other thing. So I was talking about the little details. There's so many things that they could throw in here that they just choose not to. For example, Tommen with his sword, Widow's Wail. If you actually get into these characters' heads, okay, if you're a 14-year-old boy and you're king of Westeros, and you have a Valyrian steel sword, any 14-year-old boy is going to have that sword on his hip at all times. I don't care if he's the most garbage sword fighter in the world, he's going to tell you that he is the shit, okay? And just like in Season 1, Robert Baratheon, he wanted to go joust, and Ned was like, no one's going to unhorse you. No one's going to stand up to you. Even if they could, they're not going to, because they know you're the king. And he's like, you think those cowards would let me win? And he said, yeah, they would. And that's the same way with Tommen. At least have Tommen have Widow's Wail on him. Okay? I mean, at least have characters with their banners and stuff. And without being too nitpicky, I don't think that it would cost too much money to have a plastic sword. I mean, it doesn't have to be a real sword. I mean, it just has to look like it. But I guess, okay, with that, I'm being a bit too nitpicky. Let's see what else I got here. Okay. Okay, yeah, this is the next thing. Okay, so girl power for the sake of girl power. It's always been a theme in this show to have unglorified deaths. But they overdo that. Like I said, Rickon should have spit in Ramsay's face, kicked him in the knee, and just been like, whatever then, tough guy, kill me. Because that would have made sense. That would have been consistent. That's who we know Rickon to be. A stubborn dude. Okay? Same thing, let's see. With Jon Snow getting stabbed at the end of last season. At least have him attempt to pull his sword out of the hilt. He just stood there. It's like, at least, if I was Jon Snow, I'd try to sword fight these guys. I'd, go for my sword. If I was Rickon, I would try to run in a zigzag and not get shot with the arrows. If I was Rickon, I'd spit in that fucker's face. You have to think, if I was this person, what would I think? If I was Sansa Stark, I would think, I'm not going to go into that castle full of people who killed my brother and mother and flay people living, which, yes, she knew all of that. Okay? So if I was Sansa Stark, that's what I would have done. Okay? So the smallest things can make an unglorified death a glorified death. And, okay, so again, we see Arya get stabbed up, and we keep seeing these people get stabbed up like this, and not fighting back. No fighting back in any of these, just because they want it to be these unglorified deaths. They're trying to show you how, like, yes, I understand, sometimes you're turned around and some guy just shoots an arrow into the back of your head. That happens. But at the same time, you can't, these unglorified deaths, for the sake of unglorified deaths, don't make any sense. Knowing Arya's character, she should have, punched her or, shoved her away, grabbed the knife with her hand like her mother did, grab the blade, do something. It doesn't make any sense for her to get stabbed up. She should have bled to death. I mean, it doesn't make any fucking sense. But apparently, all men must die. But, Daenerys says, but we aren't men, we're women. But that's not what that means. In the Bible, they use the word men to mean all men. Men, women, transgenders, dwarves, whatever the fuck you are. Okay. They mean humans, men. All men must die. All mortal beings must die. Okay? That means Daenerys too. That means Arya too. You can't just have this plot armor where she gets stabbed and then just magically gets healed, whatever, because, we want girl power for the sake of girl power. We want Yara to be, the queen of the Iron Islands, just for the sake of girl power. We want Daenerys to... Daenerys' story really does make sense, though. That's been great. I honestly loved that part of this. But there's these other small things that get on my nerves. And no, to give them some props, I thought the Marine storyline was honestly better because it is kind of cool to see these emerging female characters. We got Yara, a girl, Theon, no dick, Tyrion, a half man, and then Daenerys, the queen, okay, and then we have an army of dickless dudes, and then we got Varys, a dickless dude. So it's just all, it's so transparent in that one. But it makes sense there. It really does. But Sansa not telling Jon about the Vale Army doesn't make any sense. Letting Rickon die, I don't think that really makes any sense. Now, I can't really blame her for letting Rickon die by any means. But to a certain extent, they could have tried harder. Let's see. Yeah, that's pretty much how I see it. I just see unglorified deaths for the sake of unglorified deaths, and I see female empowerment just for the sake of it. This show has always been so good at making things realistic, We have sword fights, like that sword fight in season 4 between Jon and that dude who's I'm a fucking legend. I was a fucking legend in Janelli. That dude, and then Jon had to beat him, He got his chance and stabbed the dude in the back of the head. We've always seen that because it's realistic, and that's what I like to see. I like to see realistic. But Arya getting stabbed up and dying, not realistic. Lord Umber siding with a bastard Bolton. Let me get this straight. So, the past 1,000 years, the Stark line has not been broken. So, male Stark, male Stark, male Stark. It doesn't. I mean, if the older son dies, then the younger son takes over. Okay. Why the fuck would anybody side with this Ramsay dude who has no claim to the North? Okay, he's a bastard, and he's a fucking psychopath. It's not like, oh yeah, he's a really good leader though, so we should follow him. But he's not. He's really shown nothing that makes him a really good leader. He showed that he's a psychopath, and you don't know, there's no telling what he's gonna do. What would have made way more sense is for the Umbers to just switch sides and been like, yeah, man, fuck you, and just kill him, and then make Rickon the king of the North. That would have made more sense. That would have made the most sense. He was their liege lord. He was their king. They would not have just handed him over like that. It doesn't make any sense. Okay. There's a few more things I want to say. Yeah, so Barristan was the best swordsman in Westeros, and he snuck into the castle at night and rescued his king. And, I mean, that's what Jon should have attempted to do. Rickon shouldn't have been sniped from all that. He should have just been like, fuck you, dude, I'm not playing your game. And then digging those trenches would have actually made sense. And then Rickon could have died with, I mean, I'm not saying, have him have the most glorious death in the world, but at least have him, punch Ramsay in the face. At least tell him, fuck you, I'm not playing your game. Kill me then, tough guy. I would have much rather had it been like that. I much rather would have seen that. And then, yeah, the direwolves thing. They should have had Ghost and Shagdog fight in the battle or instead of 1-1. And it would have been like how Robb used Grey Wind to win lots of battles, or he used them in his battles. I mean, that would have paralleled, okay, look, Season 2 and Season 6. Then we would have had some consistency. That's what pisses me off. There's no consistency, and the characters' choices don't make any sense. Now, I'm not saying characters can't make mistakes. There's a difference between a character not acting like themselves and a character making a mistake. And it's just kind of like, it's just all over the place. It doesn't make any sense. These battles would be so much better if it made sense. I want it to feel earned. That's what I want. Anyway, I'm glad you all listened to this rant. That's how I feel. And, yeah, that's pretty much it.